Thank you. I'm so happy to be involved with this effort and this organization over some period of time. It's one of the real privileges that I think I have. Back in 1974, at the age of 29, I was elected to represent the northwest corner of Connecticut in the U.S. Congress, and there are a lot of very famous constituents I discovered. I was very naive about that. I thought everyone had Alexander Calder and Arthur Miller and William Styron and Philip Roth and that sort of constituency, you know. It turned out not to be true, and a lot of those people were dead when our guest speaker became the congressman from that area some years later, although there were still many famous people left. But in terms of celebrity status, to me, Pete Scoville was really at the top of the list, and it was such an honor to know him. Not many people in this room, had that privilege and that honor, but the guy was really just unbelievable. And I remember a conversation I had with him at the Scoville house. Well, maybe I was now 31 at that point, and maybe in my first or second term, and we were talking about tough votes, tough votes on war and peace issues, on equality issues, on issues involving justice and poverty, and I said, Pete, I don't want to ever be a mystery to you. I want you to know that you and I share these values, and I'm a big fan of lobbying, Pete, but you probably won't have to lobby me on most of these things. And some years later, he said, you're absolutely right, and I'm really grateful for that. And in 1982, a few of you have heard this story before, and it's just too long to tell, so I'm just going to give you the capsule that I was running for the Senate. I had given up my seat to run for the Senate against a powerful incumbent. And Tip O'Neill, who was speaker here, called me and said, "Are you in town this weekend?" And I'm running for the Senate, so why would I be in town, right? So pardon me. So he said, I said, I am actually in town because Myra, my wife, is supposed to give birth to a child this weekend. And he said, well, can you be the first? This was the first of the Reagan radio Saturday addresses. Can you be the first to respond to Reagan? We need someone to do this. And I said, yes. And so it was supposed to be Saturday live at the CBS studios downtown. And so my Cracker Jack staff determined that Reagan was going to speak on the economy. So I prepared a 5-minute response, and at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, rushed to the hospital with my wife, who was in labor. And I had that speech down. I knew what I was going to say. And my staff was wandering around the delivery room. And my wife was saying, please get these people out of here. And so it was now 10:30, and I said to the doctor, where am I going to be at noon? He said, you're going to be right here. So my press guy called CBS, and they delayed it for an hour. But then at 11:25, we found out that Reagan was going to speak on arms control and defense. And I had no idea what I was going to say. I could make it up, but we called Pete, and no cell phones in those days. We were out in the hall at a payphone. We called Pete. Pete's he obviously answers the home phone up in the northwest corner of Connecticut. And I said, Pete, my wife's about to have a baby. Okay, I've got to respond to Reagan. And he's speaking on defense and arms control. Can you listen to the speech at noon? I'm going to be responding 1 hour later. And he said, sure, I'll do it. So I'm happy to do it. How do I get it? I said, just go on 880 WCBS in New York on the radio. And he said, well, I don't have a radio up here. And I said, how about your car? And he said, I'm not sure I get WCBS on my car radio. We're 2 hours from New York. And so if you can picture this, Reagan is speaking at 12:05 to 12:10. Pete Scoville is driving up and down that long dirt driveway trying to get the reception and trying to take notes by himself at the same time. And he managed to give me just a wonderful, series of talking points. So that was too long a story, but it tells you something about the guy, right? Now, I lost that race narrowly. Chris Murphy was 9 when I lost that race, okay? He was 9. I remember waking up at 3 in the morning, if any of you have ever lost any races for any office, and be heartbroken and shocked. And I remember waking up on my back, and I never sleep on my back, and looking at the ceiling and went, oh my God, Nancy Johnson is the Congresswoman, and took my place. And so all those issues on war and peace and equality and justice, I was just having this nightmare. What was I thinking? And I was blaming myself, as many other people did, by the way, for giving up that seat. And 20 years later, exactly, I was in Hartford, and when you get to be as old as I am and have been in politics long enough, you have children, former staffers, etc., who are in positions of power. And there's a veteran state representative named Roberta Willis who worked in my congressional office. And I dropped in to see her to have coffee. And I said, okay, first thing I want to know, because she represents that district, in the state legislative district, can we beat Nancy Johnson? Because we've been trying for a long time. In fact, by the way, this guy almost beat her as a campaign manager for somebody else, okay, just earlier. Anyway, she said, yeah, we're absolutely beating her this year. I said, with who? She said, Chris Murphy. I said, who's Chris Murphy? She said, he's just this fabulous state senator. And so I met him down here some months later, and I said, I'm going back to Connecticut I told my wife, I said, I'm going back to, and my children, I said, I'm going back to Connecticut for 4 months. I have a consulting firm. My clients are just going to have to live with it, and I'm going to spend full time working volunteer for Chris Murphy and Joe Courtney. Joe on the eastern side of the state, who was facing a tough incumbent, and Rom Simmons, and Chris on the western side of the state. And I think it's about the most important thing I've ever done. Really. Because the conversation with Pete about not having any mysteries, you still have to push your representatives, but it's so nice to know that they're where you are, and maybe even more impassioned and committed than you are, and willing to give their full time and their lives and the family sacrifices more than most people. Chris won that race and never, ever, ever disappointed me, ever. Never. And then he won a Senate race, and I decided I really had to lobby him. That it was really important, and I didn't have really great sense of hope about this. I needed to have him go on the Foreign Relations Committee. And he invited me I went to the Hill, I remember, and I walked with him to the Senate chapel. He was a senator-elect, and he had to go practice the swearing-in ceremony, so he could, know what to do. And we were walking there, and I'm going to be a little obvious now. I said, Chris, I really think you should go on foreign relations. And he looked at me, not with scorn or anything, but just like, really? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, I just went to Harry Reid and told him I want to be on the committee. And I got on the Metro and I was going back and I thought about Pete Scoville, how proud he would be to have a guy like this in the Senate. He's really very, very special. And for those of you who are new fellows, he's a busy guy, but when you have ideas, you have opinions, you can get them through to him. You really can. The staff is great. So with that, the junior senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy.